Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Series, a month-long event celebrating the authors and narrators that bring romance stories to life. Listen along as Viviana, Enchantress of Books, interviews your favorite writers and voices, shares special guest posts, and stay tuned for some special information at the conclusion of the episode.
Hi, everyone. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with guest narrator, Stephen Dexter. Welcome to Audiobook Lovin, Stephen. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Viviana. Thank you very much.
I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, your name has come up a lot when I've had conversations with like, hey, who should I chat with? And they're like, Stephen. I'm like, okay.
Good. Money well spent.
Yes, you do have your fans, which is good. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been narrating, and how you got started?
Okay. Well, I am from a small town in Connecticut. It was actually, it's not even a town. It's a borough. And I went to school. I went to undergrad in Connecticut, but always knew that I wanted to get into acting and everything. And it wasn't until for the longest time, it was just about making people laugh and getting attention. And then it was in college when I started doing like serious plays. I really saw the amount of work and the other sides of the power of theater and of acting and of not and of getting more out of it than just, hey, they're looking at me and listening to me. So then I decided to save up and move to New York City, and I went to drama school for 3 years at the Stella Adler Studio, and then towards the end of my last year, my 3-year program, 2 representatives from Audible, producer, and then one of their veteran narrators, who I don't remember her name, they came and did a workshop, and they had told us that, like, I had heard of Audible because of they're just everywhere, and even then, this was in 2012. Their ads were everywhere. I'd never really listened to audiobooks all that much since, I was a little kid, and it was actually like on a cassette tape. And then it was just like Disney.
Yeah.
But it really, really intrigued me because I love reading. And we put they put such an emphasis on voice and speech at the school that I went to. So we were, really, really highly trained. And so that's why these representatives were there. They said, we're really expanding, and we'd like to look at this market of recent drama school graduates, especially schools that have a renowned voice and speech program. So they did their workshop, and I kept like volunteering as much as I could to like read the sides, because I'm like, oh, this is like this could be a mock audition slash audition, and got up there as much as I could, asked as many questions as I could, and then afterwards went and talked to the producer and got his card, and then got an audition, and they sent me sides of, he knew my voice, so I think I don't know if they still do it this way, but they, you kind of send in like little samples, like, okay, they kind of get used to where your sound would best be suited, but then also to try a little bit of diversity to see how versatile you are. And so he gave me a nonfiction, he gave me sci-fi, and I think he gave me a biography of Abraham Lincoln. So he gave me these like little sides, and then I went into their headquarters in Newark and did them, and he gave me some notes and everything and said, this is kind of how it is. And he basically hired me on the spot. And then I think within, it wasn't very long, maybe like a month or two, I had my first book, which was a business nonfiction called The Reluctant Entrepreneur, which is about like growing your business and everything. And then from there, I got a sci-fi book, and then I got like a coming of age book. And then I left the country actually to go do a play in Japan for 4 months. And when I came back, there was a little bit of a dry spell. I thought that I would pick up where I left off with Audible. And also at this point, I was still very, very green. I thought that Audible was the only game in town. I thought that if you weren't getting audiobooks from Audible, you weren't getting audiobooks. I didn't know that all these other publishers, which it's blown up since the industry has really blown up. They all have their own, kind of studios now. Audible was is still kind of, it all ends up there, but they're not the only ones producing. And so it took a little while for me to kind of like say, I'm back, and I'd love to, get back in the booth and everything. And because once I got back from doing the play, I was working at a restaurant again, as a lot of actors do. And they gave me a romance, which I was like, wow, okay. I'd never read romance recreationally. And obviously up to that point, I'd never done an audiobook romance, and it became a pretty big hit. And then from then on, so that was probably 2014, I think. So from then on, I've been working pretty steadily for Audible and a lot of other different publishers, and predominantly in contemporary romance.
Hmm. Isn't it awesome how when you discover, oh, there's other options,
Yeah.
it's like a world opens up from, from the Simon and Schuster to Penguin have their
Yep.
own, then Blackstone, Dreamscape, now Podium. There's a bunch of other ones too that are
Yep. And
up and
there's
coming.
some amazing indie
Yes.
publishers that get some amazing, because a lot of times these authors, like they don't get the best deal
Hmm.
because they don't have maybe the biggest audience yet. So obviously to make, if writing is what they do for a living, you want to get as much as you can from it and have the most control over your product. There's some like amazing authors that I've gotten to work with huge fan bases through these indie publishers.
Hmm.
It's not that they couldn't work and sell their stuff to these people, but they're just like, no, I like the smaller area of just like, I can get the books out there and have more of a connection, and like I said, like have more of a say in who's cast and the marketing and all that sort of thing. So it's great. It doesn't, there's no there are even some aspects of like the bigger ones that I don't like,
Hmm.
as opposed to, working with the indie ones, where you have a little bit more independence and agency than you would necessarily if you're working with where there's people constantly like looking over your shoulder and critiquing things. You start to get into like I can't do anything without them stopping me.
Hmm. Oh gosh, yeah. And when you're in the middle of something, you're going, really?
Yeah,
Seriously?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also the perk of working more with indies is that you'll have a smaller group of teams, but also have that ability to maybe connect with the authors if you had a question regarding the
Yes.
character's intent or the character where it's going, things that are important for you to be able to perform.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And it's a lot easier to then cultivate relationships
Yeah.
that way and stick with them. Like there have been a lot of authors that I've worked with through Audible, Penguin Random House, Macmillan, like the bigger Blackstone and Tantor, uh, that I've developed relationships with, that have then gone on to, like, you get hired, like in any acting job, you find a writer who really likes you, and then they'll keep hiring you, things like that. But the most I think the strongest relationships have come from, those indie, where you just have this, it's like it's social at this point. Like, they're
Hmm.
friends of mine, they're acquaintances, as opposed to just, I only hear from them when there's a job,
Yeah. But
so it's nice.
mhm. It is very nice. And the readers too and the listeners, I think have also started to be part of that community. That when it comes down to like recommendations, and the authors will reach out to some of their listeners and say, hey, I have this audiobook that I'm thinking about casting, any suggestions? And
Hmm.
then we have a list of potential.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen those. I've seen in the Facebook groups.
Yep.
I've seen
Hmm.
those simple one-line questions that
Yeah.
get 400 answers in 30 minutes.
Yes.
Amazing.
It is.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was so surprised, is that you're always, as an actor, I feel like, looking for stimulation and challenges and things like that, and ways to grow and expand. And so when this romance novel came in, I was like, oh, okay. Again, I have no experience with that. I was like, it was kind of in the wake of 50 Shades of Grey. So the romance thing, like contemporary, was kind of really coming back into like the mainstream, this, like, for lack of a better term, like acceptance.
Hmm.
Okay, it's not just Fabio on the cover with the sweeping calligraphy and things like that. It's real and it's okay. It's not like taboo. There's really good writing and there's really good characters. It's not just pornography. You know what I mean?
Oh yes, God, I hate that term, mommy
Yeah.
porn.
No. So,
Yeah.
but I had no idea until this book. It was Hothouse Flower by Krista and Becca Ritchie, that how big the fan base was. I had no idea that it like rivals sci-fi as
Mm-hmm.
far as the number of people that are interested and just so incredibly passionate about it, that these characters, which then it goes, it can go back and forth when it goes from the page to your ear. A lot of times it exceeds the reader's expectations, the fans' expectations, and other times it falls short, which I've noticed, which is a lot when anything I feel like is adapted, because essentially we are kind of adapting it to another medium, even though we're reading it, we're giving it our own, we're making choices, and obviously we have our voices for the protagonist, like our natural voices or whatever, the lead voice, and then the choices that we make for secondary characters, supporting characters. A lot of times it doesn't match up, so it's interesting just to see when you read that, like, oh my god, that's exactly what I heard in my head, or no,
Mm-hmm.
she sounds nothing like what I thought.
Yeah, well, it's
It's
so
fun.
susceptible. We
Yeah,
have our own thoughts, and like, some of us, when we read, we see a movie or we listen, it's almost like, or when we're reading, we hear the voices, especially if we know who's been cast. Like, I
yeah,
already have like a lot of you guys' voices in the head, kind of like, and your cadences. And so if I'm reading a book and I know that you're narrating it, I already hear you in my head. Kind of freaky, but okay. Um, but for some it works. Others is like, oh no, that was just wrong casting. Or sometimes the character is supposed to be 20 but he sounds older, and then you'll have
yeah,
other listeners that are like, well, I had friends that sounded like they were smoking cigarettes for 20 years, they were only 18.
yeah,
So it's so subjective. It's objective, which is also why we love the romance genre, because there's something for everybody.
yeah.
Hmm. So
It's
once you've been cast for a book,
Mhm.
what's your prep process like?
Well, I like to reach out to the author, and get as much information as I can, because that's the person that I obviously want to please first and please the most, because like I said, having such a love of literature myself, and being a writer myself, I know that it's a very vulnerable thing, and it's your child that you're putting out, and so I want to make sure that I do my best to, as we adapt it to this other form, I'm as true to the visions, just like just like you said, when you're listening, when people are writing, they hear a voice.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I'll get, he sounds like, a famous actor or something like that, like and I'll be like, oh, okay, obviously I'm not going to do a impersonation, but I'll try to capture that essence of who that person is. I try to get as much as I can and ask as many questions as I can. Usually, authors, and it's become more and more, they kind of do it automatically. Well, they'll just give tons of information. I've had like character Bibles, and I like as much as possible, huge spreadsheets where it's, where the person grew up and all that. It's so incredibly broken down, and it not only is it an incredible help, but it, like just like we were talking about, earlier, with the quality of your equipment, it really shows how much this person cares,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to if it's just like a little description about their age and their, age and accent, no accent. But sometimes it goes into these deep, like, backstory, not like really, really long on a spreadsheet, but, and it just like, it shows me, wow, this person really, really put so much time and effort and heart into this. So that's always really, really nice. And then next, I will, if I have a co-narrator, which in contemporary romance, a lot of these dual narrations I do, I'll reach out to them, because, or they'll reach whoever gets to the other first, and you try to coordinate with voices, and trying to, obviously I'm not going to sound like, Savannah Peach would, Summer Morton or something, but you try to like say, okay, this is what you're kind of going for. If there's an accent, like they say light, well, what is your idea of a light accent versus mine? And then you kind of like, because, obviously it can be a little bit jarring when you're going from a male to a female perspective. It's a completely different voice. But if you can kind of, like I was saying before with the references, like capture that essence
Mm-hmm.
of that person, that's really good, and it helps with kind of like the flow of the book. And then I tried when I first started doing audiobooks, I broke down everything the way I would a script, because essentially that's what it is. You're kind of like doing a monologue. You're telling this story. So I'm utilizing a lot of my acting training, but I found that when I would really, really break it down, the way that I do, a script, it started to stilt my performance a little bit when I would do it, because I knew it was kind of predictable, and I have a tendency to get a little bit too technically proficient as opposed to natural. Was something that I had issues with when I was being trained. So what I've kind of done recently is and recently is in several years now, I don't usually read the book very thoroughly ahead of time, because I like to be, I obviously know the plot, the major plot points and shifts. I've coordinated with the author to make sure that I get everything about these characters right. So it's like the characters I will build ahead of time, but then I'm completely surprised when I put them in the situation, because I just feel like it adds a level of spontaneity. Sometimes I'm, really, really surprised by something, or I'll get to a certain point and realize, okay, you know what? I didn't see that coming. So I'll go back
Mm-hmm.
and I'll read something again, because I'm like, well, if it ends up here, then I can't do this part this way. I have to, kind of go back and adjust. So, but it's never anything major. And I found that that's really worked for me. And again, you obviously go to the authors, go to the fans and the listeners, and see what they're saying and things like that. And if it works, if the author's coming back and is very, very grateful, if the fans are very happy, if I feel good and confident with the work that I put in, then it's one of those, and like I don't really feel a need to change it. Which is interesting, because I think I might be in the minority. I don't know. I haven't talked to a lot of narrators about their process. But I know there are a couple that, and I kind of like, okay, so like golden, not narrator, Audible Hall of Fame narrators that don't read the book ahead of time, but obviously do their prep work. So they're not, caught off guard with, oh my God, he has an English accent. I didn't know that till page 300. Like
Oh, that's happened.
it has, I feel like it's happened to everybody once, where you're like, let me just, especially with supporting characters,
Yes.
you just be like, whatever. And then, you get to the end of the book, and and you know what? I could never stand your Irish brogue. And you're like, oh, damn it. Why did I gave him a Midwest, it's happened to everybody. And you learn the hard way. You got to go back and I'll do every line Irish.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's so that's usually what I do. And then again, it's nice for me to then be just surprised. A lot of times, if I don't get a lot of information from the author, then I'll go through and pick out, characters, especially if it's a book that's all me. I'll go through and pick out the characters, and basically what I do is get a sense of that character. And the best way for me, obviously mark an accent if they have that. That's very important. Mark an age if they have that. Profession is also a big one. And what I do is I'll like I said, with sometimes authors do, I'll put an actor that I know. And sometimes, rather than write a huge long backstory, I'll just write, Oscar Isaacs, Paul Giamatti, Helen Mirren, and I'll just,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, I don't do impersonations of that person, but it's that kind of what they bring. to a role is what I'm trying to capture. And that's a huge help because you just kind of go in rather than write out these descriptors because, again, it could be a little bit different when you're like, oh, I said gruff and slimy ears, but what did that say? So
What
you
does
see,
that sound like? Yeah.
yeah, but if I write, Alan Rickman, or
Yeah.
like right Severus Snape, like, oh, okay, boom,
Mm-hmm.
I know that guy, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that's one of the questions that I was going to ask was about how you go about selecting how the characters are going to sound and their tones, because you also only have a certain range within your voice. And I know that guys, especially the deeper the tone, their voices, they can only go so high. They can go a little lower, but that also hurts on the voice.
Yeah,
Especially when you're doing it for so long, for many hours in the booth and things like that, that you're going, oh, ouch, drinking your teas and just not talking to anybody for a few days
yeah.
to recoup. So yeah, it's good to have those notes, like you were saying, as far as the Slytherin.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
HP.
but then like you said, it's so important to make sure that, like, if you're gonna go really really raspy, or you're gonna go really high or something, obviously they tell you, like, never ever do that if it's the protagonist,
Mm-hmm.
and never do that if it's the third person narrator. I don't know why you would, but, like, because you don't want to be sitting in a booth for, depending on how long your sessions can be, like 5-6 hours at a time, doing a voice that's shredding your vocal cords. But sometimes for supporting characters, where you go through and you're like, okay, this character doesn't really come back, so I can do like a Krusty the Clown. If it's like a really really bad, if it's like an alien or something that's, yeah, like, really, you're like, okay, I can do that because it's not for very long. They're only in this one scene or two scenes. But yeah, it's again, that's where, like, the preparation of just knowing what's coming and making decisions that you're like, okay, that's a really cool sounding voice, but can you sustain that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but also even with series, have you started asking the authors, or when you get from the production company, is this the first book in the series, and how many books are there in the total? Because sometimes that secondary waitress um in book 1 is now all of a sudden the heroine in book
Yeah.
15 or 4.
Yep.
That's important too, because you don't want to make them sound bubbly and very Valley Girl, for an example, because she was just that 1 or 2 lines, and then all of a sudden you're going, oh shit, I have to do that for an entire book. No.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times you can, yeah, you want to make sure that it's first and foremost, like, something that's not grating to the listener, even if it's really easy for you to do. You want something that people can, like, listen to, especially when you're right inside their head, literally, if they're in
Yeah.
an earbud,
Mhm.
and they could be trying to sleep. I mean, you don't want to, like, do something where it's like, where that it totally. I remember when I did my audition, uh one of what they, you fill out like an application, and you submit your resume and everything, and they ask, like, what kind of character voices can you do. So I was just kind of going from, well, what I used to love doing character voices and goofy cartoon voices when I was little, and there were some that, even after my voice changed, I could still kind of do. But I remember the producer saying, so just so you know, these are really really funny, and he even had me do some of them. Um, that you will need to have, an incredible, like, a wide array of voices, but this isn't animation.
Mhm.
This isn't like a cartoon show. This is, you have your narrator voice, and then you have these voices that it's not a half-hour show on Cartoon Network. So just so you know, which was more of, like, I was like, oh, that's kind of nice to know that I can kind of always stay in that range. And I mean, I'm sure that, like, some of the best, it's just the subtlest change, but but they stick to it, and it's so good that even when it's going from a male to a female. And I've heard narrators where it, I have my own way of doing it, and obviously that changes as the characters, the personalities are different. But I'm listening to a version of Frankenstein right now as I go to sleep, and the narrator, when he does, like, a female's voice, he just goes up ever so slightly, but I believe it.
Mhm.
I'm not, and he go, so he'll go from the narrator to, uh, to Victor Frankenstein or the monster, and a woman's voice, and it really doesn't sound all that different. But I am hearing 4 different people or 3 different people.
Yeah, and it's just sometimes the most slightly change in cadence or a little bit of the higher tone. You also,
Yep.
a lot of you guys have your regular talking voice that we normally get when we're doing these kind of chats, and then all of a sudden you flip the switch and it becomes a little bit more formal, and now you're doing, I'm like, oh, he switched to narrator voice. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that helps.
It's so funny when when I remember, because it's it's rare, because we do such a lot of times an isolated profession. We're in these little boxes that, yes, we're talking a lot on email and social media and things like that, but we don't really see each other a lot.
Hmm.
And it's unfortunate that I guess they did APAC this year, but it was all virtual. But I
Yeah.
always look forward to that, because it's a way for us to, like, oh my God, you're real. And and I don't know if I've met anyone in person who sounds exactly like they do in their work. Like, you talk to, and I'm like, oh my God, but they're saying the same thing about me.
Hmm.
We're just so, you're so animated, especially in contemporary romance, because there's a lot, you have this, like, there's this intimacy. So, like, I'm sure if I was, if I was in, like, a library, with Aaron Mallon or Andrew Aiden or, Zach Weber, like, yeah, we'd be talking to each other very similar to the way we read, we perform. But when you're at, like, the boat basin drinking tequila and wine, and not at the same time, not mixed together, but you're like, oh my God, you sound completely different. It's really funny.
It is. And I know that a lot of the narrators have started to attend conventions, hint, hint,
Mhm.
that, I've had the pleasure of meeting a few of them. I think there was in Washington, D.C., we went to a Polycon a few years ago. I think it's now been 3 years. And I'm like, wow, time flies. And I got
Mhm.
to meet Savannah Peachwood and Emma Wilder and got to hang out with Andy. And I still heard them narrating voice. But at the same time, there was moments where, like you were saying, that I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is your just chilly voice. Got it. Got it. But
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like any. I love watching. I used to love, um, when I would listen to radio and then see the person's face, or when I would, like I said, I loved cartoons on Nickelodeon and things like that, and even to this day, like, Cartoon Network cartoons and Fox, and to actually see them speaking in their normal voice. You'd never, like, that's the thing that they say. There's been some great documentaries,
Mm-hmm.
like, you'd never know. But then the guy says, but if I went, oh, then you're like, oh my God, you're SpongeBob. I remember it was so funny. It was I think Tom Hanks was on the Ellen show, and Tom Hanks is Woody and Ellen is Dory. And I remember they said, like, well, what I usually do is, because when I talk, when I meet kids, they don't believe it. So I say, close your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they speak as Woody. It's still the same thing, but they're like, close your eye and picture Woody. And then they start speaking. And it was so funny. I remember watching that episode, and Tom Hanks was like, so everybody in the audience. And I'm like, oh my, I can't believe I'm doing this. But I closed my eyes and I heard a conversation between Woody and Dory.
Yes, yes. I saw that episode, loved it.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's so fun. It's like, and their voices aren't all that different, but
Mm-mm.
they are playing a character. And when you channel, you're like, okay, I'm seeing Woody in his hat and Dory,
Yeah.
swirling in circles. Yeah. It's
It's
amazing
it is.
transformation.
And sometimes you guys do get recognized for the voice too. There's been some because the voice is very distinct because either the baritone or there's some form of a cadence and stuff like that. And I know that in other cases it's been not because of the cold talking, but it's just how they said a word and they're going, oh, you
Yeah.
ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been at, when I've done, like, other interviews, been asked to say certain words or use a certain accent or something, if that's popular with the, yeah. And it's funny. But then there's a part of it, and I know that a lot of narrators are very, obviously there are a lot of pseudonyms,
Mm-hmm.
and that a lot of them are more, private and things like that. They don't, because they like to maintain they don't have really a presence on social media. and so you don't really know what they look like. And I like that kind of idea. It's not my personality, but sometimes I think like, if people knew what a dork I am, would that ruin a lot of the
I'm laughing because I know some of you guys, and I'm
yeah,
going, oh, if they only knew what of a
exactly.
dork they
Yeah,
were.
exactly. So many of us are so I remember, like meeting people was it when I met Andrew Iden, and he had like popsicles on his shirt. It was just such an, but we really like hit it off, and like
Hmm.
people, and then
He's great.
especially, the APAC parties and the naughties, Johnny Heller and Scott
Yep.
Briddick and Hillary Huber, like all those amazing people. Dion Graham is always there. Like you start, you have a few cocktails and everything, and you're like, oh my God, but they're such an amazing people. It's such an amazing community.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think also too, when it comes down to the anonymity and being able to use our imagination when it comes down to not knowing what you look like,
Hmm.
is that it helps when it comes down to the character being 6'3", blonde and green eyes
Exactly.
and things like that. And when you know what they're like, okay. But then at the same time, you're listening, so you can give that, I don't care what you look like right now, you're Irish and thank you, you know. So
Mhm.
it helps out from there. But there's a lot of, good things for that whole anonymity stuff. Like I said, it's all of you guys are gamers, and you know awesome individuals, but also very dorky poo. And then you're doing all these steamy hot erotica scenes, and everybody's like, oh my God, when he says that word, and you're going, oh babe, if you only knew. So it's fun. You mentioned accents, and I did too, because we are suckers for them.
Mhm.
And you have an array, because you can do things from like PR British to Southern and Russian and all this other stuff. Which is
Mhm.
your favorite to perform?
Um, I really like the Southern accent.
Mm-hmm.
I like, like the more soft R, kind of like Georgia, but I like the Texas hard R. It's fun for me because it is kind of like such a departure. Like I said, being from Connecticut,
Connecticut. Yeah.
it's such a departure for me. I really feel like I am kind of a different person. And it's also, there's such an ease to it that I feel like I can relax a lot more into it than even when I'm doing my when I'm just using my normal accent, neutral, I guess you'd say. Speaking with the Southern accent, there's such a like musicality. It's like a not peaceful river for me. Um, so that's fun sometimes when when you have to like sit in a booth for a long time to just have this kind of like relaxation. You can um and again, it's always up it's up to the author as far as how thick they want it. Do you want like real, like, born and bred, like deep like Kentucky, uh or do you want like somebody that is maybe from Texas but doesn't really, because especially like the younger generations, it's TV and music, and then they go, you go off to college somewhere, and you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want just that like little hint? And I kind of like it in between, because you can also, like, you can drop the G's at the end of ing words. There's a lot of like just ease to it. And then especially when they get into like, the idioms, if the author's really playing into the Southern aspect, if it's not like a fish out of water, like it's a guy from uh Mississippi in New York. But if it's like, like right now, I'm working on the Bootleg Springs series for Claire Kingsley and Lucy Score. I'm finishing that up. And so it takes place, in Bootleg Spring in Virginia. And so you get West Virginia, and um you get the whole town. You get to like just really have fun and create these characters and give it different degrees of it. And yeah, I think that's probably my favorite. I haven't been able to do it all that much unless it was my choice to do it. I haven't done it as a protagonist, but I really like the Irish accent, like Dublin
Mm-hmm.
Irish. Um, and kind of like South London. I think it's Cockney is like I don't know if that's the proper term for it anymore, but that one's fun.
Mm-hmm. The
Yeah,
southern one, it's always very interesting because there's a difference between Savannah, Georgia,
yeah,
southern,
yeah,
and if you're from a native from Atlanta versus Atlanta,
yeah.
and then Texas. And
Yep.
then with Texas, I have family there, but
Mhm.
they were born and raised in Connecticut.
Oh wow.
So, which is so now they've lived there since I think 10, 8, 7, stuff like that. And now
Okay.
when you talk to them, they have a little bit of a Southern Texan tang when they
Yeah.
talk. And I'm going, y'all are from Connecticut.
Yeah.
And they're like, we've lived here most of our lives. I'm like, okay. So that little thing, and that's the other thing too, when I go visit them, I pick up the accents
Oh
very
yeah.
quickly. And I'm like, oh, Viv, don't do that because it could be misconstrued as making fun. And I just pick it up. Same thing when I visit Savannah, you know,
Yeah.
and I still say ka. That one time I went to Boston.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard, because it's fun when you feel like you don't necessarily have one, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if it. I mean, I guess it kind of goes the other way. I feel like maybe people from the South, they. I mean, I have friends that, and I'm sure people too, where it's the opposite. They
They
grew
don't
up
like it.
in
Yeah.
the South, and they go, but they talk to you in the Northeast, and they feel like or just because I mean, the way you develop the accent in the first place is just as a little kid,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you hear. um but then when they go home, it's like they're speaking another language.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends I was like, I had no idea you were from South Carolina, but then I'll watch like this, they'll post a video on Facebook of them with their family, all their South Carolina family, like at Christmas, and they have like the thickest accent. There's a woman who I know who lives in Kingston, New York. She was a stage manager, uh, who's from New Orleans, and I had no idea. I thought, oh, for sure, she's like born and raised in New York, because it's also like it's just her personality. But then we did a workshop thing, and we went away up into the mountains of Vermont to work on this play, and we were all sitting around this table like drinking wine, and she had a like a really thick New Orleans accent. That's what we thought. We thought she was joking, but she's like, no, she's like, my neutral is is the act. She's like, this is how I really it was. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so funny.
Or sometimes when people get upset and pissed off,
Yes,
the
yeah.
accent comes out. Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I
That's
noticed
happened to
that
you, huh?
yeah, when they argue. Oh my
Uh-huh.
god. I mean, you see that sometimes in movies. I think especially with English actors,
Mm-hmm.
they're doing a neutral. I love it when who's really good? Jude Law and Gary Oldman. If you listen, when they start yelling or get really emotional and they're like crying, they slip and they'll go into their English accent.
Mm-hmm.
So funny where you see like, yeah, it's something about you activate where your brain's like, I'm not thinking about this anymore. I'm
Yeah.
get
The code
mad.
switching, it just happens. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I'll switch into Spanish and then they all know it's, oh,
Yeah.
really pissed when the Argentinian accent comes out.
Yeah.
And you're going, oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back off.
Balurdos and all these other words are coming out. They're like, oh damn.
Yeah. The neutral English just is not enough.
No, yeah. But that's the other thing too, sometimes when it comes down to other languages, there's more ways to say the similar things. And
Yes.
this,
Yes.
same thing with the dialogues and the dialects in, like you were saying, the South.
Yep.
Instead of saying you're an idiot, is like bless your heart.
Yeah.
So same thing
Yep.
in Spanish and other languages. There's just so many different ways to say the same thing.
Yeah.
And the different variances.
Yeah.
So,
Or there's things that just aren't they're not translatable.
oh yeah.
My grandmother is Czechoslovakian, and that's when we knew she was really mad. She would say things to us, and they could have been swears. Maybe that's why she was like, no, there's no translation for it. I should ask her now. I should say, what did that really mean?
Yeah, or talk to her and just record it, her saying it, and then go to Google, see what this means.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she'll still be, because that's how family is. They'll probably still say, no, there's just no translation, and you're going,
Yeah,
liar.
it's not, it's a check. There's no, I can't break it down. And then look it up on Google Translate.
Yeah,
Kid,
exactly.
get the fuck
Those
out
are
of my,
always fun.
you
Yeah.
have one more fucking cookie, but all we heard was,
Exactly. Yeah. There's also just sometimes where those different levels of, like we have in Spanish, the different levels of love, like I care for you, I love you, I adore you, things like that. But the same thing for different levels of dumbassness and stupidity.
yeah,
And so like in Chilean, it's like no seas huevón, like don't be an egg, which is hilarious when you do it in English. Don't be an egg.
yeah. But it's one of those things where, we all have like the different expressions where it's like, what the hell does that mean? It's like, but if you say it in that language, I had
Yeah.
I had a manager who I absolutely loved when at the restaurant that I worked at when I first moved to New York, who was Puerto Rican, and the things that he would say when he got mad. And it's the thing that you don't. I mean, I took 4 years of Spanish in high school, so there are a lot of things that I understand, but there's things that I don't. But you understand the intention and the context. So it's like he would say things, and I'm like, he'd say, "Do you know what that means?" And I'd be like, "I do. I don't, but I do. Please don't tell me what it actually means, because I know some of those words, and if I put them together, it's really really funny." Yeah, but he would say like under his breath, or he would, it was really funny, like really frustrated with a customer, and I'm like, I wish that that's what I should do. I should talk to my grandmother and say, what were those things in Czech? Because sometimes you don't. She used to say, she told me what this means. She used to say, Maria Borgia Svata Trojica, which basically translates to, it's basically Jesus, Joseph, and Mary. So, and I still use that because sometimes it's like, I'll break a glass or something and saying like, God damn it, or it isn't enough.
Right.
So Maria Borgia Svata Trojica, like sometimes there's just, you need the consonants.
Yes. It's just so much more emphasis on certain things, whether it's like because of the different language, a lot of the times it's one of those like, me cago en diez.
Yes.
It's like, hijo de la gran puta, stuff like that. And you're going, woo, she really pissed. But I just literally just said, I shit on 10.
Yeah.
It does, we have our sayings, but again, it just sounds so much better.
Yeah, it just have those. You're able to express your anger because you're hitting those letters, those syllables.
Yeah,
in the right place. Even if if you translate it into English, it's like it's just nonsense.
Yes, it is. Yeah, but again, it's just, which is one of the reasons why I love different languages. There's just so many ways to say certain things, and even with the English language, it can be nice and stuff like that. But sometimes you're going, how could have I said that better?
Yeah, that's where you're like, I'm not a poet.
Yeah,
it's like, but I do know this in another language, so
yes,
it's kind of poetry.
Exactly, but that's also when it comes down to romance. It's one of the things that we love when it comes down to the audiobooks is hearing you guys bust out the accents, or if the author has written a different language, sometimes when they're in the throes of romance, all of a sudden the French comes out, or other Spanish or whatever comes out, and you're going, ooh, when he said that, say it again.
That's always a lot of fun because, like I said, I took 4 years of Spanish, so I love when I can practice that. I loved it when I worked at that restaurant because I had taken 4 years of it because I loved it so much, and obviously it comes in very handy. And then moved on to, I took 2 years of Italian, and I love both of them, but I'd never really used it until I got to New York City. And then it was so much fun because then it's like, because then I'm working with obviously a much more diverse pool of human beings than where I came from. So it was cool to be able to utilize that. And then of course, inevitably it gets into dirty talk. I learned some of the filthy, like that's the thing, the
first thing you learn, all the curse words,
the swears and the expression. So that's why, like I was saying with my manager, it was so much fun because he could say things and I could say things. or they would take advantage of me and say, Steven, say this. They'd say, and that's the thing is I'm like, I know those words. They're not bad individually,
When you put
but
them
I know
together.
what you're doing. I know what you're doing. I will say it, but it was just, but then every once in a while there'll be, either a Spanish speaking character, or it'll be, or it'll, just be whatever the protagonist who is proficient in Spanish, or Italian. I love, and so it's nice to just be able to like go back into that and yeah, because it is so much fun when you can go there and really utilize that again, because it's I don't get to do it very often.
Yeah. Did you get a lot of questions about rolling your R's when it came down to Spanish?
From who?
Well, like your peers and friends that spoke Spanish, because that's usually some people can do the rolling of the R's
Oh,
and
I
some
can do
people
it.
can't. Oh, okay. That's what I was gonna ask. Yeah.
Yep. No, that was that was funny. That's why my mom says she flunked it, because she couldn't do it.
Ah, yeah.
But I remember from I started in middle school taking foreign language classes, and they were very happy that I could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember in high school when we had Spanish classes, they tried to put me in like Spanish for Spanish speakers, like advanced, and I go, no, 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 no. I speak Spanish, I kill it, but it's like conversational. None of this estrujulas and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things that we love to do with non-native speakers was like, can you roll your R's?
Yeah. Yeah. Give them the hardest, give them the most double R's.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I've done that with my mother. I don't do it anymore because it makes her feel bad. Like,
Oh yeah. But can you do this?
Yeah.
So what's the most difficult or hardest accent for you then?
Ooh. Like Dutch is hard. Dutch, like Netherlands, I've had to do that one. That's difficult. Geez. I'd probably say that one.
When it comes down to audiobooks, there are a lot of different styles, specifically narrating in duet, dual, or solo point of view. Do you have a favorite to do?
It depends. Sometimes the dual narration is a lot of fun. I prefer, if I'm doing romance, I prefer dual narration. That's usually the way it goes. If I do other genres, which I've done, like horror, I'm working on a horror comedy series right now. But when I've done in sci-fi, that's been a lot of fun, because then, because if it's just you don't have to worry about the coordination. It's really just making sure that like you're honoring like the author, and like you were saying before, like, is this a series? Because I'm about to make a really bold choice on this character, and if this person comes up as a lead, I don't want to be like, having to get throat surgery because I chose this voice in the first book. And that's kind of cool to just kind of do everything. But I have done some romances where it's just been me, and I'm like, it's because so many romances, romance novels are written by women, that a lot of times it just inevitably becomes from the women's point of view. So there have been some that I've done where I'm like, I really wish this has been a dual narration, or at least, kind of break that up a little bit, because it really does seem like it's kind of strange that I, as a guy, am telling this story that is obviously from a woman's point of view.
Yeah, there's been some books like that where it's mainly the male point of view, but it's a woman narrating it, and we're going, "Oh, this would have been so much better if he had a guy do it," and then vice
Exactly.
versa. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
do
not,
like it when there's from the male narration point of view.
yeah, it goes both ways. Yeah, I've done romances by myself where it's really very smartly spread across. It's an ensemble. I've done them where, yeah, it's from a male's perspective. But then when it's from a female's perspective, but I'm doing it, there's like a I just, again, not that like this should have all been a woman, but I feel like this should have been a dual narration.
Yeah.
So we could get that broken up. But yeah.
And duets are starting to be more popular too.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've found that seems to be pretty close to the norm. I know it's such a huge and ever expanding genre, but it seems like most of them are they like to get the two point of views. And it's amazing sometimes. It's really amazing when the book is written by a woman, how much they nail the male point of view. And this is something that, like I've said before, and either to authors themselves, it was just like I was like, I have to write you an email about how good you are, how accurate you are. Or I've said, like in other interviews and things like that, where it's like there's just certain things where you're like, how the hell do you know that? It's which I think it goes both ways, where sometimes there's and again, this is what we were talking about, of like expanding.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that when you can tell that it's a man writing a woman, or when you can tell that it's if it's a TV show or a movie, there's just like this point of view where it's like, no, that's not. And there's sometimes where there are whereas, like, I'm sure that you and a lot of my female actor friends are like, if I could have had a conversation with this guy, and so you got to no, we don't think that way, we don't do that, that's not what there are certain times where I'm doing a book and I'm like, that's not what happens. That's like, but then there are other times where I read it, I'm like, my God, this is so, they're inside our head.
Yeah.
And it's like, this person really, really did their homework. They really must have gotten a guy and really had them open up, open up that vault about all of our, not necessarily, but just like the inner workings of, not these like broad strokes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of like nuance and little things, just like there are with women, which I learn a lot about doing these books. Which it's like, that's something else that I say, whenever, if ever, you want to like teach, a cisgender guy how to treat a woman properly, or what a woman, have them read romance books, because you get such an insight into the longings and into the insecurities and things like that, and into the ways that men take advantage of those things, and the fucked up stuff that men can do. That it's because I said I have learned so much from just, again, it's sometimes it gives me joy, it makes me laugh when it's the male point of view, and it's especially when there's like things about the male anatomy and how it works. And a lot of times that's just euphemisms that are hilarious. But a lot of but then there's things that I'm like, wow, I never would have, I had no idea that women felt that way. And again, it may not be all women, but I'll read something and then I'll talk to someone and they'll be like, yeah, we do, or I have, or things like that. So it's fascinating, the kind of like education that you get while you're just in this little box.
Well, even as listeners, we know there's moments where we're listening and reading and we're like, if you guys would have just talked to each other, 10 years would not have passed by. Oh, God. Or just realizing that you have a kink that you didn't know was a kink.
Yeah. There have been so many things where, the whole, if you could have just, but that's yelling at your TV.
Yeah.
On a TV, or for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
The movie, like, oh, they couldn't, but we do that a lot. I'm sure if, you go back through your own love life, and you're like, if I'd only known that if I only known that he yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a lot. Do you get that question a lot though? Like, if for your friends and families that know that you read romance, like, hey, have you learned anything?
Uh, Usually, inevitably, it's like, do you do sex scenes?
Uh,
Things like that. That's usually I mean, if it's a friend or, if it's somebody I'm not related to, that's a fun conversation. If it's somebody
yeah.
I'm related to, I try to just keep it to 1 or 2 word answers. I don't want to
Hmm.
really elaborate anything, but uh the question that I get, I think a lot is, yeah, it's about like the sex scenes. How do you do those, or do you get turned on
Hmm.
um when you're doing them? And the answer is yeah. I mean, there's like, to do them, you're obviously doing a job. It's as if, I've done like intimate scenes on camera and on stage and things like that. This is obviously a little bit different because I'm in a booth, I'm in a little black box by myself. But you try to obviously take it as seriously as the characters do. And you just try to make it as much of like that kind of dance as you can. And then there are some times where obviously I'm not doing anything to myself while I'm reading it, but there are, and you want that, just like when you're doing something on camera. Like, there is an aspect of, I'm enjoying this.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'd go so far maybe as to call it like arousal, because of like, there can be connotations with that, but um you get excited.
Yeah.
And the way that, especially when the scenes built are written in a way that really, really accurately represents a sexual encounter, and its ebbs and flows and things like that. It really, you kind of like fall into that. Um, what I will say that I have learned that's been kind of exciting in my in my personal life is uh, certain activities that I've been like, wow, I've never tried that before. I will have to make a note of that. And places. A lot of times where these scenes take place is like a really kind of, erotic, when you're like, okay, that's, again,
Hmm.
I'll have to make a note of that.
Well, yeah, the listeners and the readers will have conversations where we're like, oh yeah, that chapter, oh, I highlighted that and gave that to my partner and
Yeah.
said later tonight.
Yeah. Some of them, though, yeah, they're written very, very,
Hmm.
but where it's a very natural. um Again, I get hung up, like a lot of narrators, and we get kind of, vocal about it sometimes. Is like, dialogue tags
Yeah.
is not, unless somebody new enters the room, or there's a really specific way that the conversation is changed, like not including he said, she said.
Hmm.
As especially when you're reading, when you're narrating, it's like you're pushing pause. It's like a little tiny, like, I'm dating myself, but like when when you would burn songs onto a CD, and you get that little like
Yeah.
yeah, when you like get it from Napster and you could tell that it was illegal.
Hmm.
Or subsequently you're downloading, an illegal movie or something, and you get that little or like, that's how I equate dialogue tags, especially during sex scenes, because it has to flow. And typically, not always the case, because I've done harem, group sex and things like that, but it's two people. And the way that the character, the author has written, they just have to trust themselves that they've written two very distinct people. You can tell
Hmm.
when the man is talking, when the woman is talking, or when one man is talking or the other man is talking, because I've done, male romances before too, because they're just so different in the way that they talk and the things they say.
Hmm.
So like, that's sometimes something that can kind of like throw a little bit of a, if they're if there are a lot of like he should, see the way they say things like that, where I'm like, because you just want to kind of let it flow.
Yeah. Well, it's even not even on the intimate scenes, just when there's dialogue or when there's like that banter. That's the other
Yeah.
type of two. What I'm finding is when the authors are including, because we live in a world of technology and there's text messages
Yes.
in the book. And when it's done in duet style, or they'll do only that section as a duet where she does all the lines and you do all the guidelines, when they're constantly saying Viviana, and then I say my lines, and then you go Steven, and then back and forth. I'm like, well, you should know who's talking because I'm the one talking. So I'm like, drop the names on those tags when it's a text message.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of that's something that has come up in like in the audiobook community as well, as like, because obviously you want to honor what's on the page, but a lot of times that's meant for the eyes.
Yes.
And when you bring the voice into it, you don't necessarily need that. So that there have been times where and 99% of the time the author is cool with it, where they're just like, I had to write that person's name, text, because I've done so many text message conversations or email, or whatever, where it's I'm like, if I were reading this, I would need that, but can we kind of, for the sake of this other way of reading, we can drop that, because obviously if I'm speaking in my, then it's me, and hopefully by then I've established the fact that now this is what the woman sounds like, or this is what the other guy sounds like, or whoever. When I do that voice, that's them texting.
Yeah. And I think a lot of authors nowadays are starting to, when they know they're going to do it in audio, even if they potentially think they're going to be doing it in audio, they'll start writing it a little bit different with less tags.
Yes.
Or when they include the tags, then when they turn in the script, because I've done those when I've had to update the scripts for people, they will say that just remove the tags, or just, the notes of the narrator is say the first time when it's in a text message and then just go on afterwards. You don't have to. So that's good. You had mentioned that you have done a lot of contemporary romance. Is there, because romance is an umbrella term and we have all these awesome subgenres underneath it, as you were saying, urban fantasy, sci-fi. Is there one in particular that you love to perform?
It's I like sci-fi, I like horror. Those are two genres that I like to read in my recreationally. So whenever that comes up, or like, period piece, things like that. I did, like a colonial male romance. I did a Willa Cather, who, not, I wouldn't consider her contemporary, but like she was, of the plains romance. It took place in like the 19th century. Those are fun, but like sci-fi and horror, because it adds this other element that is really, really exciting to me, if it's aliens. And then I've also done like fantasy, dragon, vampire, things like that, because I'm like that adds kind of this, that's something that, again, in my spare time, it really excites me when I'm reading. If I'm reading Lord of the Rings or something, and then I get a fantasy, dragons, wizards, magic powers, romance, it's kind of like, oh, all right,
cool. I think also as an actor, you would like it because it broadens opportunities and possibilities as far as where you can take these characters to as well.
Yeah, it's also fun because you have a lot more creative freedom when it comes to characters. Again, like I said, it can bite you in the ass. If you're like, oh, okay, well, this is a grizzled, old alien, prisoner or something, and he's having this conversation about how the protagonist will never get out of this, godforsaken prison. And then, all right, that was amazing. That was so much fun to do this really raspy, disgusting, like bizarre accent voice. And then that person breaks out of jail in the next book, and now they're the sidekick. And you're like, so it jumps around. So that's why I have to remind myself, like, I'll try out a new voice. I'll say, oh, this works perfect. But then remind myself, like, okay, but if this does come up, like in subsequent books, and sometimes you can ask ahead of time, but a lot of times you're reading books as the author is writing them, so they don't even know.
Yeah.
You don't want to put a restriction, say, listen, could you keep this person out of the book if you want me to keep reading? It's like, no, you're not going to put up any kind of, it's the story goes where it wants to go and the author does what they want to do. But that's one where I've, it's cool to do like a wind dragon voice or a mythic queen of the swamp, like things like that. It's kind of cool to have fun that way, because then you feel like a little kid, and I feel like I'm like the books that I used to listen to when I was little, were usually just really, like short books and things like that, but
those are always fun.
Yeah.
Within the romance and the genres, there's now these tropes where it's like, office romance or enemies to lovers, and you do a lot of contemporary with all these different tropes. Is there one in particular that is a favorite, or that you're like, oh yeah, okay, we'll do this one better,
The friends to lovers is kind of fun if they have kind of like a really, and this kind of goes for both, for enemies to lovers and friends to lovers. I like when they give each other shit.
Yeah.
I like when it's a friendship that's like, you're almost like my brother, my sister. Yeah, not in like a, in like a creepy way, but when they're just so comfortable.
Yeah.
The person knows them so well, and they just, they have this really sassy, they're best friends, and then inevitably, like, oh my God, I'm in love, and then you see the switch in their personality, where it's like, why are you being so weird around me? Why can't you why are you, I think that's kind of fun, because I just think obviously when it's written well, it's very funny, those awkward, well, first of all, the repartee when they're still giving each other crap back and forth, because I have that kind of personality. Like when I meet people, I kind of I'll throw out like sass and things like that, or I'll be sarcastic, or I'll be I'll come across as like this mock asshole to see how they deal, and if they can tell that I'm joking. And then when they give it back, it's like, okay, now we're going to be friends because we can. And I like kind of keeping that up. They have like these degrading nicknames for each other and things like that, which can then work just as well with enemies. I like that when they legitimately don't like each other, and then all of a sudden they're like, shit, the person either does something that really redeems them, or they just, there's something really, they see this other side of the person, because of how they treat their grandmother, or like whatever comes out, and that can be really, really beautiful. I think maybe, because I've had both in my personal life, and I know that kind of switch of like, oh, I could never have a crush on Charlene. She's a friend. We go roll, we do all that. We play video games. She's like one of the guys, like that type of thing. And then, flash forward a couple years in puberty, and you're like, I really, really like her.
Yeah.
But I can't say anything because I don't want to ruin the friendship.
Yeah. Yeah. As the girl that was usually surrounded by the guys, because that was that girlfriend, that friend that was, I got along better with the guys than I did with the girls. There was always that one that you're like crushing on, and you're going, that will not ruin the friendship. Will not ruin the friendship. You dickwad. Give me the king console and stuff like that. So it's just like, and that's when you have to be extra mean to them for some reason.
Yeah.
Just to be like, you're still one of the guys. You're still not totally crushing on you. Yep. It's good.
Yeah. It's difficult where you're like, why can't I go back to
Yeah. Or there's also those moments too where I think it's funny when especially in the rom-coms, when it's starting off and you're like being told by a friend that, oh, you guys would make a great couple, and you start listing all the reasons why, and most of them is one of those like, no, they're no, the way that they just are to this or they're to that and stuff like that, and then you're going, that's not so bad actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
the banter is great. Yeah.
When people are like thrown together in a situation that they're just not supposed to be, if it's like, if it's a class thing, like sometimes that's the job, or it's somebody's bodyguard. you know, if it's like you're saying, if it's a rom-com, usually if it's not, if it's a more kind of dramatic romance and it's a serious kind of thing, then that's a little bit different. But yeah, but the ones that have a real sense of humor about them, a real almost like awareness
Mm-hmm.
about them, those are the ones that I really like. And there are some authors that we just get each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like I just love the way that they write. You know, dialogue obviously is really, really important. That's probably my favorite because, you know, as an actor, you just love to have those conversations, those interactions, and so much is revealed through that sort of thing. But sometimes the you know, from the first person, that's usually, you're talking about like what I like. Like I first person is always my favorite. Is always the easiest. I like doing the third person narration. I've done that a lot with the more fantastical or sci-fi horror type things, but I really like, you know, this is the inner monologue
Mm-hmm.
type thing, because it's so revealing to what we say versus what we think. You know, like that type of thing where you're having a conversation with somebody, but then you're thinking like, you know, I just can't stop looking at her eyes. I can't stop, you know, he has such a, you know, beautiful muscles, and I can't be thinking that, you know, like it's like that.
Yeah. It's those moments too when like she looks at him and she realizes, oh, he has abs.
Yeah,
And you know, or he looks at her and he's like, boobs.
yeah, yeah. Or it's just like, yeah, it's just like that inevitable, you know, like he's trouble.
Yeah.
He's
Mm-hmm.
trouble. You're just like, ah, shit. You have this, yeah, they have that conversation where, yeah, a lot of times it's physical, or I like it when it's, you know, when it's first, like it starts with something intellectual,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't, like, oh my god, I never realized that you like that sort of thing, and then it's like, and she has boobs.
Yes, that's true.
Wait a second, I never know, I never noticed. Or, you know, you get the she's all that moment where usually you know, you see her in sweatpants
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, a huge like t-shirt or something, and then she gets dressed up and you're like, oh my god. You know,
Yeah.
or the opposite, or you're used to seeing them in their really sharp, you know,
Suits and stuff.
pantsuit, and then you see them in just their pajamas, and you're like, oh, all right,
Mhm. Usually jeans. Um,
yes. Yep.
yeah, I will say though that from a girl that wears glasses, those moments where she's all she does is take the glasses off, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden she's hot to him. I'm going, yeah, tried that. No. Yep,
That's
those are
Superman.
fun. Yes.
Oh, wow,
Oh yeah. Oh
I never
yeah.
knew. What? Yeah.
Ah, exactly. Yeah, those moments are hilarious. When it comes down to having these conversations with you guys, I will reach out to some friends online and just say, hey, you know, I'm going to be talking to Steven today. And do you guys have any questions and stuff like that? And Brittany Cunningham was like, ooh, I love him. And I'm going, okay, great. Do you have any questions? And she's like, yeah. So she says, I've enjoyed your work in more serious roles as well as titles that show off your comedic timing. As an actor, do you find one easier or comes more naturally than the other?
Well, hello, Brittany. That's a great question. I would probably say, and we've kind of touched on it a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, I think the comedic ones, because my thing is that, and again, you can only go from who you are, and you just activate the different aspects of yourself and things like that, and which one you want to emphasize. I was always, you know, like I said, like the nerd, the dork, the class clown. I had very, um, I was shorter than a lot of my male counterparts. I had very thick glasses because one of my eyes, I was born, my left eye turned in. So I needed really thick glasses before they could do the surgery really, really fast. So I needed really thick glasses to basically pull my left eye muscle straight. And then I had a big gap in my teeth. And so I wasn't, and I was, you know, kind of, I had female friends, but I was scared to kind of, again, speak up about my crushes. So I would go about it with humor, and I would be like, okay, I'll make you laugh. And that'll be kind of be my way of establishing myself and making it so the guys that uh are kind of enter in with humor and like I said, kind of chiding, playfully teasing, uh they're either male love interest or female interest, and then there's like this deeper side that's revealed, this more vulnerable side that's revealed, that I really like, which is most of the even the funny ones, you know, because you can only be goofy and funny for so long where it's like, well, what else is there to you? You don't want to be one of those people, you know, it's just always on. um I mean, as far as leads, sometimes there's the goofy, you know, comedic relief supporting character, but I really like the guys that are really funny and seem like they're just always happy and in a good mood. But then you talk to them and you find out that like they have there's some serious baggage, uh, and that they are more than just, you know, a goofy voice, more than just good for a laugh. I like that, although, but there are, you know, there are some more dramatic role, obviously, like, you know, like a good argument is always fun. You know, if it's a father confronting his son, if it's or a son confronting his father, or the patriarch, or, you know, the scene of betrayal, where, you know, it's a male female or a male male, and it's just like, how could you do this to me? um yeah, that's really I mean, those are fun. Arguments are fun. I mean, I've had scenes that have brought me to tears, with people who are sick, people who are on the verge of death. Um, yeah, so and it's tough because again, it's like the funny ones, yeah, they're really and that's very close to who I am, so maybe that's the easiest to connect to. But then obviously when you're like, I'm crying, like I've had to stop because I'm like, I can't cry that much. I can't. First of all, I'm making a mess all over my pop screen. You know, but like I can't. It some you know, again, sometimes you
You
gotta
start
like,
mumbling when you get that
yeah,
emotional and you're going, I can't do that.
you gotta kind of, you know, like pull it back. So it's, but there have been scenes that have been written so beautiful, and then, you know, they're just things in life that
Hit
make me
different.
very emotional. And then there are things, you know, things like in movies, I there's something about father son like reconciliation scenes, you know, where a son is visiting his father if he's sick or on his deathbed. There's been one where, like, you know, kids had special needs, kids were in hospitals and things like that. You know, I worked in a group home with kids that had special, like, socio and developmental, like, behavioral disorders and things like that. So it has a soft spot. I have a soft spot for that. So yeah, I think it's both, depending on depending on what the serious scene is, but usually pretty unanimously, if it's a goofy guy who then gets to show a deeper side, that's usually my favorite. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's especially if you could connect with them because that's a little bit goofy how you are and stuff like that, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. Yeah. Something else too that you were talking about. Now I'm just curious, and that's something that I always ask when I meet new people, is because I tend to give out terms of endearment and nicknames to people. And that's kind of like my love language a little bit.
Okay.
Like if you get one, you know I really like you. Not that that means I don't like anyone that doesn't have one, because I'm gonna get that. Someone's gonna text me. In romance, in these books, they use them a lot. You know, like, hey, honey,
Yep.
and the characters come up with different things depending on the dynamics and things like that. Do you actually use them in real life?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Um well, my fiance, we call oh god, we well, this is that whole thing about I'm opening up to you.
See what I mean? I was going, oh, I didn't know you were engaged, and do you want to share this? And ooh,
Yeah.
what's that name?
No, I call her I call her Shmoo,
Mhm.
and she calls me Schming.
Oh.
And I don't really remember necessarily where that started, but that's probably the most frequent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I
Do you do them
my
with friends or is it just significant others?
it's I have, yeah, friends that have kind of like nicknames. Um, it's more significant others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of like someone who I I I like, like there's the go-tos, but my father gave us and my mother, I have a younger sister, he gave us such weird nicknames. They were like, because sometimes you give a nickname and it's in reference to like, oh, because they, you know, all-star, because he plays baseball.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's in reference to something that you do
Yeah.
or you're good at. Uh, my father would come up with these really weird names, and I would be like, Dad, where the hell did that come from? And why? And he's like, I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. You're just, like my growing up, my sister, well, this does have it's he used to call her keeper, or like keep or keepus. And I guess it's because when she was first born, he said she's a keeper. And so it's like he would call her keep, but then he would, come up with all these like variations of it. Um, he would call, obviously my name is Steven, but he would call me Stefanovich. Uh, he would call me, and then he had this really weird one. It was Yatecum. And he spelled it one time because he put it on a funny wanted poster. We went to like a frontier town, and he spelled it Yaat space Come. And I would ask him, what is that? What is that? He's like, Steven, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like I kind of picked up on that like, yes, there is the, you know, um, a variation of the person's name, or, honey, sweetie,
Mm-hmm.
like we use babe and things like that. But, I'm like, no, it's gotta be so Shmoo and
Yeah.
Schming. I
Yeah.
think she just immediately responded with Schming, and I was like, all right, this is why it works.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's some that come up in the audiobooks that I really 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 like. They're really creative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those
Yeah,
are
they're
always
fun.
fun. I remember funny story when I with my kid, the first time I got, hey Peter, come over. And he was like, oh, I got a nickname. And I'm going, yeah, you got a nickname. And then a few months later, and he goes, hey, mom, why are you calling me pita? It's like for the pita bread. And I go, no, it's pain in the ass. And he goes, okay. He walked off. And
Aw,
it's like now he even signs the cards to me sometimes. Love, your dearest pita.
aw, that's really cute.
Yeah.
Oh, never heard
Yeah.
that.
But I'll have friends that there's certain ones that I do, like there's one specifically that I like, hey handsome, or the one that's called, hey love and stuff like that. Or just again, just things that come out once in a while and things like that. But like my sister's like, hey Pay, I'm like, shut up. Um,
Yeah, I call my, stinker,
mm-hmm.
the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine, we always say my darling.
Mm-hmm.
My darling, my guy friend, just because he has this, he has such a beautiful, like resonant voice. He's done a lot of like Shakespeare and classic theater. He's got this beautiful voice, and he has like this kind of like old Hollywood quality to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I started it because of, like the, like Zsa Zsa Gabor, like my darling,
Mm.
darling, darling, like, oh, come on, like Gloria Swanson, like old black and white movies and things. So he just reminded me. So like whenever we text and things like that, I was always my darling. How are you, my darling?
Yeah. I have one like that. I say, hey handsome, and he goes, hey darling. So that's, friendships, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always like the some of these authors get really creative, and I'm going, oh, I would have thought of that. Or they'll start using them too. All my friends are like, what book have you been reading? I'm like,
Or just feel that. Yeah.
yeah. So when you're not working, what do you do for fun?
Let's see. I do like to read when I'm not reading. Uh, I like to be in nature. I like going on hikes. Um I like playing video games.
Hmm.
I try to make sure that I keep a cap on that because you said you're a gamer, right?
Yeah, in my younger years and stuff like that. But even now with the iPhones and stuff like that, there's a game I'm going, ooh,
Yeah,
yeah, it's been a few hours. Gotta go.
yeah. You can get carried away,
Uh-huh.
and time can, can slip away from you. And so, especially when it's like right now we're getting into like nicer weather, and obviously everything's in bloom. Post COVID. Uh, I'm like, I want to take advantage of. I have games that I have not played. I bought them like a year ago, and I have not played them because I know that once I start, I won't be able to stop. So
Mm,
it's like I will keep that one aside until it's gray and cold again.
that is true.
But yeah, I like to do that. I like to go to the movies. Um I don't know. I like new experiences. I like adventures.
Mm,
Uh yeah, I like to travel.
mm,
I really um I had never really gone anywhere all that. My parents, we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, so we didn't go on big, I didn't go to Disney World until I was way too old for Disney World.
Some
But
would say that there's no such thing, by the way, but
well, yeah,
I get it.
no, I agree. When we went, what I will say, I was a little too old for Magic Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm glad that I went because I got to see like Cinderella's castle, and I got to have that. But I think I went on maybe 2 or 3 rides that whole day. My sister's almost 4 years younger than me, so she was kind of more in the like, okay, uh, there might have been more rides that I went on reluctantly. I would never have gone on, but I did. But then like there's so many different parks down there and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So like MGM was really really cool, and then I remember we went back a couple years later. We skipped Magic Kingdom and just did like Universal Studios and things like that. But we had been up. I've been from Montreal all the way, excuse me, down to Florida. Um, on different road trips and things like that. And then we went to Puerto Rico in 2011, which was a lot of fun, and which wasn't it's basically a state.
Yeah.
It's a combo, so it's not really it's not a foreign country, but it feels like it. Uh, and so that was really really cool. That was a lot of fun. I'd never seen like like a sea, like the Caribbean down there. It only been like the Atlantic Ocean. So that was different to see that beautiful water. But then when my fiance is a what they call a diplo brat because her father worked for the there's like army brat. She was a
Mm-hmm.
diplo because her father worked for the Foreign Service and then later the State Department. So she was born in Chile
Hmm.
and then lived in Bolivia, uh, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Guatemala, Virginia for a little while, and then she moved to New York to go to NYU for college. So she just has this wanderlust of just traveling and things like that. And I had never really like, yeah, like I'll go to Europe. So, but she's like, no, if we're gonna be together, we have we have to travel. So the first time we went to Barcelona in 2018, and I just was like, oh my God, this is what I've been missing.
Mm-hmm.
So from then, and we that's where we got engaged, was in
Oh.
Barcelona. And then the following year we went to Paris. And then last year, and sadly, we were gonna go to Italy, but we had to postpone that. And then for our honeymoon, we're gonna be going to South Africa because that's where she grew up, spent a significant amount of her life. So we're gonna check that out. But that's just something that has become, recently just something that I'm like, this is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so much fun to And then when I went to Japan, I guess that's technically went before Barcelona, but that was for work.
It's different. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did get to enjoy myself quite a bit, but it was a touring, we were touring the play. So it was really kind of, it was in and out of a lot of the cities. But I said, it's nothing is a greater, other than maybe space travel, really gives you that kind of perspective of how big this place is.
Mm-hmm.
And just how to learn and accept. I remember, like going to Japan, and I was by myself. I mean, I had the cast was basically consisted of all Japanese actors. I had a couple of them were around my age, so they were fluent in English. I had an Englishman who had been teaching Japanese, who was like my interpreter, and we worked on the script together because the script was written in Japanese and then translated. So I kind of helped make it a little more natural. But I was basically there by myself. I spent a lot of time by myself exploring, and it was the first time that like I was a minority. I mean, where I was like the only white guy, like walking around, and to have that kind of perspective for the
Mm-hmm.
first time in my life was very interesting. And it wasn't like, obviously it was nothing like terrible that happened, but just that sense of other,
Mm-hmm.
of like, I don't, I feel like it was a very interesting experience that was very educational, and then obviously, and then just learning the different things about that culture on my own, and also from these, the friends that I had in the cast that also spoke English, that I could, and then the ones that couldn't, that would then talk to me through ones that could,
Mm-hmm.
friends that could, so we could still communicate, and I could learn about them and about these different places in the history of, and also just to be surrounded by things that have been around for so much longer than like anything man-made in America. Like just to be in Japan, where something that was like 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old, and in Barcelona, where the city's under the city, and I don't know, it really starts to broaden the horizons.
Yeah. It definitely feeds your sense of adventure.
It really does. Yeah. That was such a great, yeah. It's just so cool. Cause I'm like, yeah, there's amazing, I've always had a fascination with history, and like, and being in Connecticut, I would go to a lot of museums. My parents were always really good about taking my sister and I to the different science museums and dinosaurs and art and things like that. So, and obviously there are natural structures that are very old, but just
Mm-hmm.
to be, in front of something that was built by human hands thousands of years ago,
Yep.
and that's still where it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing, yeah, or like these temples that they took me to in Japan. It was, it's fascinating. You're hit by such a sense of like power.
Yeah, and that there's other stuff that's greater than you. It's really fun.
Exactly.
Mhm.
That's the big lesson, is that like
Mhm.
it's so much big, not yeah, it was just such a sense of like where your place in
Mhm.
this life and on this planet.
Mhm. And then in the the blink of an eye situation where they never probably people that were making this wall, for an example, never thought that we fast forward would be looking at
Yeah,
that wall, you know,
exactly.
and how the impact is of what we do today impacts tomorrow. It's a lot of lessons. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite word?
Ooh. Ah, God, this changes. This changes. That's something that my fiance and I do as well, because we both she's a writer as well, and we both have a love of, we both love to read, that we will throw out words we think are great that we just saw. So like I'll be, like reading, and I'll just, because she, I have my booth at my home, in my apartment, and she has her office in our apartment, but I'll be like in the living room, and I'll be reading or something, and I'll shout out, chrysanthemum is a great word. And she'd be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And that, like sometimes but then there's other words where we don't we never heard it before. We don't know what it means, and we'll define it for each other. Or it'll come up in a book. A lot of times I'll be,
Mhm.
reading it, and then I'll take a break, or when I'm done for the day, and I'll say, this is a really, really great word. A lot of times I practice transcendental meditation. I do it every morning, and it's been great because on Zoom, the head of the David Lynch Foundation, which is a big TM group, he does the meditations, guided meditations on Zoom, and he begins and ends every meditation with like, did you know? Like, and it's like here's this word that we can't translate, and there's so many beautiful, like, it's I look forward to that as much as the actual meditation itself. Is like, what poem or what thing is he get, and a lot of times he'll come up with really, and I can't wait to tell her when I'm done about what I learned. But I think my favorite word that has really probably had the most longevity is citrus. I love oranges. It's my favorite fruit all time. And I just love the word citrus. Conjures refreshment and sweetness and delicious taste and sunshine. I think of like an orange and that bright color. And when you cut into it, it's just a very pleasant thing.
Yeah. No, I get it totally. What's your favorite curse word? You're like, damn it, I knew she was gonna ask me that.
Boy, I really don't. I'm trying to think. I'm even, go back to our conversation about languages. I'm going to like other language, if there's like a man. I really don't know. I mean, obviously like the oh God.
It's okay. Well, we can always, when you come back later, I'll ask you again and say, so, okay, so you didn't give me it last time. So now that you're back, you've had more time to think about it.
Okay.
What's your word?
let me get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
I did think that has come up before. And I did think that you were going to ask that, but it's so difficult because there's, we were talking about like, the versatility of fuck, but
I know, especially when you have other languages under your umbrella too. It's like, oh, okay. So don't worry. You'll think about it later on. We'll catch up another day and have you back, and then I'll ask again.
Okay, good.
Cool. Yep. So we've reached the game portion of our chat.
Oh boy.
Yes. And I did give him homework. It's more fun that way. The game that we've been playing with guests has been Two Truths and a Lie, where you tell us 3 things about you, and one of them is a lie. We have to figure out which one that is. I like to think that the listeners are playing along. So in the comments, let me know what you thought was the lie, and we'll go from there. So whenever you're ready.
Okay. I have swam with great white sharks. I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I have been on my knees in front of Paul Rudd.
Wow. Dang. Okay, this is also the issue when you do give the homework, they have time to think about this.
Yeah. They can press pause. Yeah.
Yeah, and just figure out, let's see. Okay. Swam with great white. And then this is also the other thing too. It's like huge thing. And then you have OCD, or you have this other one. It's like, and it's so specific. You're going, okay, where do we go? Do we go with the completely like out there option? Or do we go with like, this is way too far fetched for this to be true?
No, I tried a whole bunch of different ones. I was like, I don't want it to be so obvious. Like, these are good because they're all kind of wacky.
Yes, exactly. And I'm like, damn it. I'm stifled. Been on your knees in front of Paul, isn't it? Is a lie?
Is a lie?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. I see there's a story there. Then I would think that the swimming with the sharks is the lie then?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
See, I should have gone with that. That was my gut feeling.
Yeah. That is something that I almost gave that away because that's something that I hope to do in South Africa. That's
Okay.
something I said to my fiance. I was like, we guys, like, you don't have to, she wants to do it, but I was like, I have to get into a cage. They're my two favorite animals. I mean, besides, like dogs, are manatees
Mm-hmm.
and great white sharks. And I hope to swim with them both. And I think, obviously manatee, that's, I mean, you go down to Clearwater, Florida and
Yeah, they're all
do
around.
that, but I'm like, oh my God, great white. And she wants to go to South Africa. So I'm like, well, I got to get into a cage. So,
Hope that goes well and that you have fun.
thank you. Yep. I'll send you
I
the
look
picture.
forward to seeing all the photos and
Yeah.
the chats there afterwards.
Don't hear about it on the news.
Yeah. Romance narrator goes to South Africa on a honeymoon and finds a completely new experience.
Eaten whole.
Yeah. No, don't say that. Sharks have a negative personalities. It's the same. I say it, similar to like pit bulls.
Yes.
People are constantly thinking that these are these horrible creatures, that they have bad temperaments and stuff like that. And when it comes down to sharks, you are invading their territory and then you're throwing food at them. They're not going to go like, that's a human, so I'm not going to bite you because the steak's over there. And people need to start thinking that when it comes down to these things, that you're invading their land, their area, and you're jumping into their world. And now, 50-50 chance. Have fun.
I mean, that's the thing is we want to be very, and her father actually brought up the facts, and we because you want to be very careful, because what a lot of places do is they'll chum.
Yeah.
They'll like lure the sharks to the cages, which that's something I don't want to do, because that's when they associate food with humans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not, when you're throwing, out a big shank of meat at the end of a line so that you can, get a picture for these, people from New York. Like that's when it gets into like kind of, a little dangerous, because and then that can encourage them to attack.
Yeah.
Because same thing, and to another extent with manatees, how when you're with them you can't touch them.
Yeah, because they'll learn to trust.
Because that's how they're fortunately they don't have any predators.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of rule in the streams and rivers that they float in. But human beings are the ones that they have to, because they come to the surface and people hit them with their boats.
Yep.
Or they, which is how I fell in love with them, was a report I did when I was in 4th grade. I still remember like feeling so bad when you see the scars and, and things like that, that all the videos that I see of, unless they're like professional scientists and they're tagging them or taking care of them, they, people have their arms like crossed over their chest. And they'll come, manatees will come right up to their face and sit, but you can't touch them, because then when they see boats, they'll associate that with friendliness and food, and they'll come to the surface, and they're more likely that they'll get hurt. But same with sharks. So we haven't looked so specific, because we're getting married next year. So I'll probably start looking and see how far ahead these things
book
get
out.
booked. Yeah, but to make sure that wherever we go, this is just where they are.
Mm-hmm.
This is just where they're swimming. We're not, and we're just observing. I don't want to like affect by like, tempting them to the surface. And I'd like to go someplace where we can just quietly observe them in their natural. And if we don't see any, we only see what, I don't want to go to a place where it's like, yeah, you're guaranteed to see them, because we're throwing all sorts of stuff around our boat. And now, so yes, no. we're going to make sure that's a very humane kind of thing. Because you're absolutely right. Yeah, they have such a, it's like Jaws is such an amazing movie, but it really gave them a
bad
rap.
Yeah,
they're so beautiful and curious, and so like that's what it's just a really and like you were saying, like an aspect of same reason you love traveling to other countries, is to be in a place where you don't usually, like, this is not my territory.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not negatively affecting it. I'm simply visiting.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be respectful of that. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping to just see them and share the water with them, and then be very grateful that they they decide to show up.
Yeah. So you mentioned a report about manatee. So when I was doing research, there was a video clip of you talking about manatees being your
Yes.
favorite animal. That
Yeah.
was true.
Yeah. That was a short film. Yeah, that I wrote. That was actually. I think I even say, yeah, that's basically what I say in that.
Yeah, you were like, fourth grade, I think, or something like that. You did a research.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
named the manatee and everything.
yes, Bertram. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh
But
my goodness,
yeah,
that's cute.
that when they're it's so funny things you remember. You're like, oh, it's just a. But I loved doing research on animals when I was little. So, and that was just one that really they just really stayed with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was watching the video and you got this like gleam in your eye, but I was thinking, acting.
Yeah.
And the conversation was between you and this other woman, and about your favorite animal, and you like manatee, and then she asked you like if you could be any animal, would you be like manatee? And it kind of goes from there. And I'm going, this is so cute,
Yeah.
and at the same time, I'm going, that's the conversation I would have with a friend. I did not know that was real.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Well, before we go, can you tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on, and if you can share, of course, and what you have coming out next? Vivi, talk forward. Yeah.
So currently, I am. Like I said, I'm finishing up the Bootleg Spring series, which is a 6-book series that Claire Kingsley and Lucy Score, who I've done both. I've done books for both of them individually. They collaborated on this, so and they're two of my favorite writers to work with. So that I will be finishing up. I think the book 6, Highball Rush, should be out, I think, in mid to late June. And then I'm really excited to be in June, I believe, working on my first Lauren Blakely book, which that'll be a lot of fun. She's changed the title of it, and that's one of those things where I don't know if I can say it yet.
Yep, no worries.
Okay, but I will be. I will be working with Lauren Blakely, which is great. I love her work, and I've been wanting to work with her for a long time. You see what a lot of my fellow narrators, the authors that they work with, and you try to kind of like say, okay, I haven't worked with so and so yet, and things like that. But those are probably the two as far as audiobook things that I'm working on. But yeah, I'm always so lucky to work with so many great writers, and I have work lined up for quite a while. So yeah, as long as people keep enjoying it and listening, then I will keep doing it. It's a lot of fun. And a lot, and like I said, a lot of these authors they're so great, and they just keep coming, they keep wanting to use you, and then when you'll hear from one author like so and so recommended you, and it's another author that I love, it's one of those, like you're like, oh well, then I know I'm going to love you if you're friends with this person.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for coming to and being part of this Audiobook Lovin Series for June. And everyone, thank you for hanging out with us today. And we hope you've enjoyed this interview as well as the series. So until next time, happy listenings.
The Audiobook Lovin podcast has special Patreon incentives. Join today to receive early access to podcast episodes, exclusive content with our guests, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/audiobooklovin. Thank you for your support. Thank you for joining us on the Audiobook Lovin Series, hosted by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. We hope you have enjoyed this episode as well as the series. We've included audio samples of our guests' work within the post for you to check out. Please make sure to visit the main page, link within the post, to learn more about the series, the authors, and the narrators. Please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to this series if you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to the Viviana, Enchantress of Books newsletter. Until next time, happy listening. Audiobook Lovin hopes you've enjoyed this program.